I just don't want the Undersecretary to not see a lot of smiling faces this morning. She'll see me more than anyone. Okay, I'm ready. I'll give her the big smile. Yeah, questions or note cards on the tables, and you can pass them, and my team will pick them up. I couldn't believe how many questions Secretary Vilsack answered yesterday. That was quite an opportunity for all of us, and you guys gave him some tough questions, which I really liked. I knew he was up for it. Well, while we're waiting for the Undersecretary, I just want to give you a little background of what it means to be an Undersecretary. It's a big deal. USDA has 110,000 plus employees, and there are about 250 political appointees. So there are not a lot of people who are trying to steer policy and manage the operations at the same time. So there are just a handful of undersecretaries. Very few people of those 250 have to be Senate confirmed. An undersecretary has to be Senate confirmed. And our undersecretary was confirmed on April 7th last year. And that's a big, big deal. Oh, there you go. Hello. Good morning. Good morning from Arizona, and thank you for joining us. I was just about to introduce you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a beautiful sunny day here, as they all are. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of introducing you on day 2 of our Arizona Food Summit to Undersecretary Xochitl Torres-Small, who, as I just mentioned, was confirmed in October. So she's been at the helm of rural development for a few months, but she's no stranger to politics or Washington. She was the representative, the member of Congress from the 2nd District in New Mexico, which I understand geographically is the largest congressional district in the country, other than those congressional districts where it's the entire state. She's rural at heart. Her grandparents were farm workers. She was down there in the borderlands dealing with a lot of important issues. She's a trained lawyer. She worked for Senator Tom Udall. She worked for a district court judge where they were really doing intensive work on water law and natural resources. And now she's the helm at rural development, where they do an amazingly wide range of activities. I'm always stunned. There's always a new rock to uncover. So, Madam Undersecretary, we're thrilled, just really grateful that you're here with us today, and I leave you the stage.
Good morning, Kathleen. It is so wonderful to be here with you virtually. The only thing that would have been better would be if I was there. It's a drizzly morning in DC, and I'm so sorry I'm not able to get to join you in person, but I'm excited to get to talk about food. And first, just want to say what an honor it is to be introduced by you. As a former Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture, you've really blazed a path for women who want to be involved in, and I love the way you put it, setting policy priorities while also managing operations and finding ways to support innovation that supports all of rural America, because by doing that, we support our entire country and the food security of people across our country. So thank you so much for blazing that path, and I'm grateful to get to join you today. I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about rural development as an agency and how our programs can help with food production, as well as marketing and retail and more. I'd like to say first that There's so many reasons why I'm proud to work on behalf of rural Americans, not least of which is because of their unique role in growing and producing the food that nourishes all of us, whether we live in the country, the city, or the suburbs. And I see it as a key part of my job to really inhabit that connection that we have through food and through so much other work that happens that connects rural people to people all throughout our country, and recognizing how intertwined our futures are. I was reminded of this special role and how much work and innovation is involved on a recent trip to Florida, where I visited Double C Bar Ranch, which is a family-owned and operated ranch run by Jimmy and Leslie Chapman. And Jimmy and Leslie are third generation owners whose three sons were raised on the land. And something that gives me hope is that they are now poised to take over operations. Because the Chapmans have faced their share of challenges. They started, like most Florida producers, with a mix of cattle and citrus. But when citrus greening swept Florida, the family was forced to reevaluate. A lot of farmers in this position have been selling their land to developers. They are in the shadow of Disney World, so that certainly was a lucrative potential. But they decided instead to pivot, to choose to diversify, and this time to Brahmins, beef, and blueberries. The Chapmans breed purebred Brahmin cattle, which are sold all around the world for their bloodline. They chose to finish some of their cattle on the ranch and then sell that beef to local restaurants and industries in the area. Local restaurants which are flourishing because of that tourism we talked about. They also planted blueberries where the citrus grove trees once stood. And when COVID-19 struck, they were able to offer blueberry picking as a safe option for Floridians looking for outdoor recreation. They're connecting people to food every single day. And when I met the Chapmans, I was reminded that food is, of course, foundational. It's essential. It is life. It's also pleasure and family. We celebrate with food. We connect with food. And of course, food is also business. And when business of food flourishes, so can jobs, local economies, and of course, rural communities. My agency, Rural Development, offers a number of programs to help rural communities with that business of food. And our work supports what you heard Secretary Vilsack talk about yesterday, the USDA pillars of providing nutrition support throughout all stages of life, connecting all Americans with healthy, safe, affordable food sources, developing, translating, and enacting nutrition science through partnership, while also prioritizing equity in every step that we take. If you've never heard of Rural Development, or if you learned about us recently, I want to let you know that we're a really special agency. I know I'm biased, but we're also the only part of the federal government that is specifically dedicated to rural. Through loans and grants, we help rural Americans in countless ways. It's the basic foundation of infrastructure, including water and environmental, telecommunications. I know all of you have been hearing a lot about broadband and reconnect. Also community facilities like schools and hospitals and clinics, and energy. We also provide housing support, and lastly, invest in the prosperity of the future through investments in business. I want to tell you about just one of our programs that helps with food production as an example of this work. It's the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, which improves access to healthy foods in underserved areas. The mission also prioritizes the revitalization of low-income communities through the creation and preservation of quality jobs. It's a grant program, which sometimes is rare. We have a lot of loan programs, but we like to also highlight our grants. And it provides capacity building to financial resources to eligible healthy food retail projects so that higher costs and initial barriers to entry can be overcome. So this program's grant funds can assist with all sorts of project needs, including pre-development, brick and mortar facility development, other hard capital costs, as well as equipment needs and one-time soft costs, including training and consulting needs, marketing and merchandising. And I know we talk about them as soft costs, but I can't tell you how crucial that technical assistance, what you need to know, what you've got to build to take the next step is just so crucial, and it is a foundational step of equity. So if you live in an urban area, access to healthy food retail may be something you take for granted. Maybe you can walk to your closest store, or it's within a nearby radius. But ironically, the places that are producing your healthy food often doesn't have ready access to those types of stores. It's all the prepackaged, it's the family dollar stores all across the country, but fewer fruit stands. So the Healthy Food Financing Initiative is helping with that. Rural development also helps get the food produced in rural areas across the miles to your urban supermarket. Examples of this are supporting cooperatives to put a farmer's market or grocery store into areas, value added producer grants to do more marketing into regional areas or in addition to the national market. Also, meat, poultry, and processing funds. You may have been hearing a little bit about that, and we have a current application that will be closing soon in the month of April. And finding new ways to expand markets. I want to share one more story about a great example of what can happen when our programs are put to use. It's the North Leap Family Farms in Leap, Arizona, which is located in Navajo Nation. And their mission is to tackle community issues by developing the local food system, enabling and encouraging community members to have healthy lifestyles and improving food security. So this is a 100-acre farm, but what makes it extra special is that it's operated by 30 farmer families. 3 different RD program grants were combined to support this food business. So that value-added producer grant that I recently mentioned provided a study on the feasibility of producing blue cornmeal from traditional Navajo corn. There was also the Socially Disadvantaged Groups Grant, which provided technical assistance, which we talked about earlier, and training to assess and develop the cooperative's members' business strategies, to provide innovative marketing strategies, connect producers to other USDA programs, and provide technology demonstrations. And then there was the Rural Business Development Grant, which expanded the local community food system to provide additional research, additional technical assistance to its members, build capacity and conduct outreach, as well as public education around local foods, including Navajo culture and traditions regarding food. It created this ecosystem of both supporting a market and supporting the business operations to be able to fulfill that market. So thanks in part to this assistance, the farm is thriving. Many of the farmer families grow and cultivate traditional Navajo heirloom foods such as blue corn and a variety of squash and beans. They're also growing a broad range of vegetables such as tomatoes, spinach, garlic, and others. And there's also 3 greenhouses, which is a community well for irrigation that includes a water purification system for human consumption, and an on-farm store with walk-in cold storage that's powered by a 19.7 kilowatt solar power system. The farm provides essential resources for those 30 farm families. They share irrigation water, farming equipment, supplies, seeds, and expertise. Farmer families also market their agricultural products together. It's a collection of best practices that we can now share with other communities that want to tackle community issues through developing the local food economy. I hope I've shared a little bit about all that rural development does and all of its potential to do in the communities that you serve. Because it's possible that when rural America is putting food on people's tables, we can all be better connected. So thank you so much for having me with you today, and I'm excited about the conversation.
Thank you so much, Madam Undersecretary. So here's a warning. When Secretary Vilsack invited the audience for questions, my fellow Arizonans, they lobbed some tough ones. You ready? Seatbelt on? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that overview and for punctuating what rural development does with some real life examples that are really very exciting. So let me start. I know when you have a question, raise your card up and it will be collected. But here's a couple. When it comes to food security, what is rural development's best kept secret?
That's a fun question because, and it's also frankly a little bit heartbreaking because I often hear that rural development is the federal government's best kept secret. And we don't want it to be a secret anymore. We want to make sure that our programs are accessible, that we're reaching different new communities, people who haven't maybe who've lost trust in the government or who haven't had success applying for grants in the past. We want to find ways to reach them more. But one of the things I would say that is one of our best kept secrets is that people often think of us as a bank. We have great loan opportunities, really low interest loans like the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program. But we also have grants. And so I hope people are looking for opportunities for grants too. And the Value Added Producer Grant is certainly an opportunity to support local food systems. There's a smaller version that allows you to do some of that marketing that's crucial when you want to set up a regional food system. That marketing, creating that demand for local food is crucial. And so the Value Added Producer Grant can help you do that. Then there's also a larger grant that helps you take a crop that's coming off a field and turn it into an even more valuable crop. So I guess so we're doing a lot of investments in breweries, for example, or distilleries, but also we've done one for peanut butter. We've done things for greenhouse grown products. So there's all sorts of ways to add value to your product, and those larger value added producer grants can be a great opportunity for that as well.
Great, thank you. So food systems, and I know you are doing a lot of work in this area and are excited and pumped for this area, but my question is, where do you see the biggest challenges facing rural development as it goes into this food systems work?
It's such a good question, and we're certainly seeing it as we dive into meat processing, for example. I think our vision of rural development, and specifically within the rural business and cooperative services component or agency within rural development, is that we can be a key part of supporting better local markets. But that means really diving into the industry and finding out what those gaps are, why we haven't been able to support those local markets in the past. So in meat processing, for example, when 4 companies control 85% of the beef processing in the United States, it's figuring out how to support local alternatives because it's that diversification, for example, with the Chapmans, that allows them to be resilient as there are increasing changes. COVID-19 certainly exacerbated that, exposed that if you don't have that resiliency, the ability to pivot, crises like this can ruin a business and can devastate small towns. So some of the challenges that we're finding is how do we best dive into the details about why local markets are struggling and find ways to support them. It can take a lot of technical expertise, and it also takes a lot of challenge to work directly with people who are trying to be part of the solution. So I talked a little bit in my speech about technical assistance, but how do we start those conversations and turn conversations about a solution into an application for a grant? There's a lot of specifics that need to be dived into, that need to be developed. And as we try to do this in an equitable way, providing that technical assistance to turn those into applications is really crucial. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, is finding ways to dive into those details and support folks who are making those applications and want to be a part of the solution.
Great. I have a couple questions on equity. The first one is broad, saying you've mentioned equity, but more specifically, what is rural development doing to support equity in its work? And then following on to that, can you please expand on any equity initiatives underway at USDA Rural Development to ensure USDA programs reach to all producers, such as historically underserved producers, and which will address historic discrimination in these programs, such as lending?
That's such a good thing. Yes, it's a very important question, and it's something that we've worked really hard to take this. This is not a talking point. This is how do we integrate equity into every one of our programs. And a good example of that is our priority points, which we've published for our website, both in Reconnect and others, where we identify these are the different ways that we will evaluate applications, and you'll receive priority points for certain pieces. It reflects the Biden-Harris administration's executive order that includes in their definition of equity rural. So, for example, in Reconnect, the most rural places, the least populous dense, receive priority points because it is harder to connect communities like that. In addition, we have a social vulnerability index that identifies that in times of crisis, what are the communities that are most at risk, and how do we invest in them to take on those challenges. It includes all sorts of factors. And so if a community scores high on that social vulnerability index, there are priority points for that as well. So that's a way we've taken equity and turned it into a system in terms of the programs that we administer. Another example is one of rural development's greatest assets are the people on the ground who live in the communities that they serve. And they're led by state directors in 47 state offices across the country. And what we've worked with state directors to do is to identify places within the state that score high on the social vulnerability index, also communities in distress, which is another index, and communities that haven't participated in our programs in the last 5 years. And we're trying to reinitiate those conversations and keeping track of how often we're reaching out to these communities that have been left behind, and then tracking our success in being able to get them to apply for programs in the future. So those are some of the systems that we've tried to set up to truly advance equity. I also recognize the underserved populations, the 106 program that's been developed, that's been invested in through Congress and rural development. We're currently working on ways to best shape that program to support people on the ground, because we do have to address past inequities and make sure that as we move into the future, we are shifting our goal to invest in those who need it most.
Thank you, Madam Undersecretary. I invited my collaborator here, Director Mark Killian of our Arizona Department of Agriculture, on the stage to ask you a question.
Good morning, and you need to move your office out here to Arizona. You'd be more effective. You'd enjoy the weather. Plus, it's close to New Mexico. So, a couple of questions. We have several areas in Arizona that have no cell coverage at all in our rural areas, and the communication is critical. Along with that is we have some areas that have some broadband, but it's like made during like 5,000 years ago, and when you try and work remotely, it's almost impossible. So is your agency responsible for that, and how soon can we see some of that broadband increased in our rural areas, because it's critical for a lot of our small businesses?
Mark, that's such a good question. And I will say Congress and the Biden-Harris administration have made an incredible, unprecedented investment in broadband and making sure that we are all connected, because this is a modern day necessity. It is a utility. It is no longer a luxury. We certainly identified that in the midst of COVID. And one of the ways that Congress has invested is actually diversifying where those investments are going. So the bipartisan infrastructure law included about $65 billion for broadband, for good, reliable internet. And it goes in different pots. So the largest portion of it is going through NTIA, which will be delivered to the states. And as it's delivered to the states, that will allow states to identify where they currently are in their coverage and make specific investments. In addition, funds have gone to FCC, which is working on getting money actually to the telecoms, to the providers, to make certain access more affordable for people across America. Because there's no point, if the hardware is there, if you can't afford it, there's no point in it being there. Then the last piece, we've received about $2 billion for Reconnect to continue to expand in that backbone. We have a unique in rural development, a unique experience working in broadband in rural places. Actually, rural development has been working in broadband since I was in high school. So there's a lot of lessons learned and opportunities there. And in addition, we're able to, because we've had a mandate for a long time, to provide service with information based on the household as opposed to a census tract, for example. We've been able to gather information that's helping FCC improve their maps, which I know many folks have heard about. So that's one way that we're helping. The other piece that's I think important to the way rural development is contributing to the solution is that we have a technology neutral approach, but we do have a speed requirement. And that speed requirement has allowed us to invest in a lot of fiber that can also be used to support cell phone service in the future. So I was talking to a mayor in a small town who remembers when he moved to the town, the exact place in the hill where he had to drive to in order to make a cell phone call. But about 6 months after he moved, rural development finished a broadband investment that brought fiber to the town. And shortly thereafter, within the same year, a cell phone company had put up a tower connected to that fiber that allowed them to use cell phone service. So that's where those types of physical investments can not only improve broadband, but improve cell phone service in rural areas as well.
How do we find out, who do we need to talk to in our own state, or how do we find out where that's going? I'll just give you a personal example. Down at our ranch, the only way we can communicate is with a satellite phone. But just over the mountain, 30 miles away is a town where they do have cell service. And so how do we find out how we make those connections? And do we go to your local office here in Phoenix and say, we need cell service here? Or who do we talk to?
That's such a great question, Mark. And you're talking about places that are a lot like New Mexico, along the border, for example, especially in mountainous areas where you can only use a satellite phone. I remember working on this when I worked for Senator Udall. There's all sorts of challenges in communications. It also impacts, frankly, radio use for law enforcement and EMT services along in those areas. So your question is, who do you talk to? So rural development has state offices. I think Charlene is actually at the conference today, our state director for rural development. So make sure and connect to her. One of the things I'll just be vulnerable about some of the gaps in terms of that disconnect between broadband and cell phone service is that rural development can help get that fiber or the internet connectivity to an area, but cell phone service is still run through private investments. And so the other challenge is once we get that infrastructure in the ground, we still have to leverage private investments to create that cell phone service.
So just remember that when it comes to dividing up money, send it all to Arizona. We'll put it to good use.
We start with an A.
That's right.
That's right.
That's true.
That's the normal order of things.
Thank you.
You still have time for a few more questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So this next question is, which program or grant do you most commonly refer producers to who are in search of infrastructure support, such as hoop house equipment or small-scale equipment?
So hoop house equipment will likely fall under the value added producers grant. If it's a hot house or a greenhouse, there is funding for that. I will be really clear, however, that rural development typically, aside from the greenhouses example, typically only funds production once it's come off the field. So before it's while it's in the field, that's FSA, and FSA has a lot of programs to support beginning farmers, or NRCS if you want to go through their conservation route opportunities. There are funding there for farming production. The value added can include some additional greenhouse resources as well. But then once it comes out of the field, if it's about, for example, transportation of a crop to a place, that could be, we have the new food supply chain guaranteed loan program that could help address some of those transportation challenges. We have the value added producer grant, again, that can help with ways that you're adding value to the product once you take it out of the ground. Or if you're looking to make your growing more or your farming production more efficient, so adding solar panels for a well, for example, or an irrigation system, in other places, certain types of treatment for crops after they're out of the ground. The REAP, the Rural Electrification for America program, can be used to make your production more energy efficient. So those are a few options. And then I would also refer you to the other mission areas within USDA that deal more directly with production.
Great, thank you. So I think I know the sad answer to this question, but it raises a broader point. And the question is, do you have grant support to have writers work with local farmers who don't have time to write their own? And I know one of my colleagues did a value-added producers grant. And, if you're a farmer, it's just really, really hard. And in the end, it was thrown out on a technicality because they had like September 30th and October 1st mixed up in terms of the deadlines for the fiscal year. It was just a technicality that a professional grant writer wouldn't make that mistake, but a farmer, taking on a federal grant application, it's pretty tough. And then I was in the indigenous food breakout yesterday, and there's a lot of issues around getting money to Indian country if you don't have an EIN to apply for federal loans and grants. So that's a jumble of issues, but I'm throwing it out at you because it's also an issue of equity in terms of spreading money around to particularly more smaller scale operators and operators in Indian country, which is a big part of our state, as you know.
It's such an important issue, and I think we're seeing it. I'm very grateful that it is coming to the forefront now in the midst of the historic infrastructure investments, because even outside of rural development, people are worried that they're going to miss out on these investments because they don't have the resources or the expertise or frankly the time to do this work. I know I'm in a rural community. When I meet someone who wears 5 different hats depending on the time of day, sometimes they may be a farmer, they may also be a business owner as well as the mayor, and maybe a volunteer mayor at that, as well as a volunteer EMT provider. So there's certainly there's just not enough time and also the technical expertise necessary to write grants. So Kathleen, you're absolutely right. We do not have grant writers on staff. There are some limitations, frankly, with how we can use federal money to pay for grant writing for an application for our programs. That being said, we're looking to find innovative ways to support that technical assistance. We do have, which I think is unique in a lot of ways, those people on the ground that I mentioned who have had enormous success walking through the process with potential applicants. And that would be one of my biggest suggestions is if you are interested in applying for a grant or a loan through rural development, contact the state office early and build a relationship. And if you do miss the application because of a technicality or because of some other reason, contact the state office and ask for a readout. Ask for walking through the application with you to identify where those mistakes or those issues occurred so that you can have a better application next time. So don't give up. Often you end up having to go through the process multiple times. We're working to make that process simpler, but because there are a limit in terms of the amount of grants available, it is going to be a competitive process as we also work to get more funds for grants as opposed to loans. So there's a few challenges there, but I think we're working on opportunities. I will also say community colleges have been great partners. We've been able to provide some funding for community colleges or working with we've worked with actually local SBA offices in some cases to provide some of that technical assistance. But this is something we're still continuing to work on to identify ways to support, like you said, a farmer or these small business owners who want to participate and work with rural development.
Thanks. So we're here meeting in Phoenix. We've got Mayo Clinic. We've got wonderful hospitals, all kinds of access to health care here. but I know a lot of the people in the room drove long distances to be here. And it brings me back to one of my beloved topics, and that's telemedicine. And I'm wondering if you can give us a state of affairs in terms of rural development's investments in trying to help people who are far distances from urban centers get access to health care.
This is, as we deal with the impacts that COVID-19 has had across the country, I think this is one place where we can take lessons learned and develop better into the future. With COVID-19, reimbursement rates through the federal government have improved for telemedicine, and that's encouraged a lot of medical providers to invest more heavily in telemedicine to reach rural places. And we're hopeful that that will continue. That there'll be continued investment in that work, and rural development can be a great partner in that work. We have a community facilities program that can provide for nonprofits as well as local governments. If you have a hospital that's affiliated with a local government, can provide equipment both in loans and grants for telemedicine. We also have a distance learning and telemedicine, or distance learning and telemedicine grant that's available for for-profit entities. So if it's a for-profit medical center to provide care and invest in that equipment. So there's also the community facilities or Community Connect grants through RUS that can support getting broadband to a specific community facility and then connect as a hub for telemedicine. So there's great opportunities across rural development, and it's crucial to be able to get that access to care. As we look at COVID-19, death rates were about twice as high if you lived in a rural area. Maternal mortality and morbidity is about a third higher in rural areas. And so being able to bridge that divide is crucial for the sustainability of rural communities.
So I'm going to struggle a little with this next question because it's smaller type and I forgot to bring my eyeglasses on stage, honestly. I'm getting old. But the question essentially is getting information out to people. And there's a lot of interesting nutritional science around nourishment, food as medicine, help the mind, body, soul. And the question is really about the opportunities to go public with this kind of information on cable air or online television. I don't know if rural development has a role in that, but maybe also a way to pivot here is to tell us innovative ways rural development is trying to get the word out on important issues.
It's such a good question, and it is crucial to being able to serve, to create healthy communities, to support healthy communities, and also to support local markets, right? And so actually the place where I feel like there's the best opportunity for that is that value-added producer grant. So if you are producing something that is good for people, that is healthy, and getting out the information about why it is, the value-added producer grant can be an essential tool to support that marketing plan, to again support that local market that appreciates that value. In addition, when you talk about how do we just get out the word about being healthy and new science and techniques to address it, we certainly, I think, rely a lot on that local network within rural development, the boots on the ground, the people on the ground. You've got a lot of folks there who can help identify potential opportunities. And, when we try to get the word out about rural development, an underutilized resource is local radio. People are trying to get on the cable news and get, all of the news chatter, but I find that sometimes you reach rural people best because they have that radio on in the tractor shop, or because they're making that long drive to get the health care that they need, and they've got the radio on in the car. So there certainly are public announcement opportunities there. USDA has a radio system that helps do public announcements as well.
We were all aware of the very sad, tragic situation in Flint, Michigan with the water in the pipes. And in some ways, maybe it was the canary in the coal mine that we have a water infrastructure problem in this country. And with new infrastructure investments, and I know it's a shared responsibility with EPA at least, but I'm wondering if you can tell the crowd a little bit about water waste investments of rural development, how that works.
Yeah, when I was getting ready to join rural development, I was very excited. I was watching the Build Back Better legislation and all of the investments in that legislation for rural development and water and wastewater programs. And there was specifically a set aside to take on some of the challenges with lead, which we know it's a problem. We still don't know how big of a problem it is because there just isn't the reporting data across the country to identify where those lead systems are. So it's another crucial need for investment. And there was a lot of exciting investments that were in the Build Back Better legislation. Now, unfortunately, that didn't pass. And so rural development in the bipartisan infrastructure law didn't receive funding for water or wastewater. But we have a lot of great technical expertise. So when you have a rural mandate to serve rural places, you do the best you can to provide that technical assistance. We know it's still hard, but have a lot of experience working with communities that don't have a grant writer, for example. We have a lot of experience working to make wastewater projects work where otherwise they wouldn't, because we know the engineers that are available to provide those technical plans. We know we work actually very closely with RCAP and the Rural Water Association to provide technical assistance as well and support some of that technical assistance. So we've got a lot of the know-how on the ground. And we're really excited to find ways to work with EPA and states, for example, with their state revolving funds, or find other partners. Also, there is a lead partnership, a lead remediation partnership at a secretary level, at a departmental level, that USDA is a partner in, that convenes specifically to identify ways that we can collaborate better to make investments to clean our water, as well as provide safe wastewater across the country.
Okay, last question. So I remember when I was deputy secretary, I had a little piece of paper I slid under the glass on my big desk, and it was my personal priorities going into office. Actually, one of them I had to cross off pretty quickly. It was immigration reform. I know how important that is to American agriculture, but that was just not to be in that first term, at least, of the Obama administration when I served. But I had three others, and you have all this incoming stuff that happens, and things blow up always on Friday afternoon, and you've got to fix things, and CNN's calling, and all the craziness. So it's not completely in your control. But I just always like to glance back at that little pie chart that I had under my glass to remind myself what I really wanted to accomplish before I walked out the door. So this is a tough one because everything that you do in rural development is, as we say in Massachusetts, wicked important. But is there something for you that's, or a couple of things that you're just so passionate about that just make you, skip on the way to work in the morning?
We've talked about a lot of them. So certainly because of the investment, I see priorities as a place where passion meets investment. And when it comes to the opportunities and investment that we've seen from this administration in good, reliable internet, that is a crucial investment and priority that we have to advance, making sure that we use that money wisely to reach Mark's ranch and all of the places in between, so that no matter where you live, you have that modern day necessity. So that is a clear opportunity that we have to prioritize in order to do it right. The other piece we've spent a lot of time talking about, and for me it's personal because I think it's about equity, but it is that technical assistance. It's where rural development's special sauce is in terms of the people on the ground who know and live in the communities they serve. How do we make sure that those communities can better access our programs so that we're less like a bank where you have to walk in and get all dressed up and put together your portfolio and demonstrate your value and worth in investment, but more like a neighbor who sees that their neighbor is working on a project and comes over and knocks on their door and says, hey, do you want to borrow any of our tools? My hope is that by investing in rural development and by supporting, frankly, the incredible civil servants that we have on the ground and in our programs, that we'll be able to advance equity by being more like that neighbor in communities.
I love that. That's a beautiful vision to close on. And I just want to say, on behalf of Suzanne Palmieri and myself, we're so excited that you have this job. On behalf of everyone here at the summit, we're excited about your leadership. We wish you well and success in all that you do. We appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you all.